Think medieval people were innocent monks and maidens praying all day? Think again. The Middle Ages were stranger than Tinder and more unhinged than 50 Shades of Grey. From church-run brothels to public impotence trials, medieval sex makes modern scandals look tame. And wait until you hear how the church cashed in. Imagine this. You're a teenager in the Middle Ages and your parents just arranged a meeting with your future spouse. Sounds romantic, right? Maybe you're picturing candlelight, music, or at least a walk in the village square. But no, your big date involves being stuffed into a sack and tied shut. This strange practice was called bundling, and it was the medieval world's idea of safe dating. A young man and woman, fully clothed, were tucked into bed together, sometimes separated by a heavy wooden plank or sewn into bags so tight they could barely move. The goal? Let them talk and bond without the temptation of physical contact. But here's the problem. Locking two hormonal teenagers in the same bed overnight is about as effective as telling TikTok not to go viral. Records show pregnancies skyrocketed among bundling couples. Priests denounced it as immoral, yet parents defended it fiercely. Bundling became unstoppable, a medieval version of parental controls gone wrong. Now, if bundling sounds awkward, just wait until you hear what medieval people ate to get in the mood. Forget chocolate, strawberries, or oysters. Back then, aphrodisiacs came straight from the butcher shop. Bull testicles, goat reproductive organs, and sparrow brains were all on the menu, believed to supercharge passion in the bedroom. Spices like cinnamon, ginger, and saffron weren't just tasty, they were advertised as medieval Viagra. Wealthy nobles went all in, throwing love feasts during weddings where every course was designed to fuel the honeymoon. Imagine raising a goblet, toasting your bride, and then chewing on bull testicle stew. Nothing says romance quite like that. It wasn't just folk belief either. Doctors and scholars actually wrote medical manuals with titles like On the Generation of Semen and Foods That Increase Lust. This was considered real science. The logic was simple. Eat powerful body parts, gain their power. Eat testicles, get stamina. But food was just foreplay. Because after the feast came the wedding night, and that was a spectacle so public, so awkward, it makes the bundling bed look like a Disney movie. If you think meeting your partner's parents is nerve-wracking, try consummating your marriage in front of them. For nobles, a wedding wasn't officially valid until the couple proved it in bed with witnesses. Here's how it worked. After the ceremony, the bride and groom were escorted to their bedroom by guests. Friends, priests, and even family helped undress them, tucking them under the sheets like toddlers. Then came the truly awkward part. Spectators gathered around the bed, waiting for the magic to happen. Some even recorded what they saw. And once the deed was done, servants inspected the sheets for evidence. If witnesses weren't satisfied, the marriage could be annulled, and the couple might be ordered to repeat the performance, sometimes in front of even more people. Etiquette manuals of the time actually gave instructions on where witnesses should stand and what polite phrases they should say during the event. So next time you complain about wedding jitters, remember, at least your in-laws weren't standing at the foot of your honeymoon bed. And if you think this was invasive, wait until you hear how nobles scheduled their sex lives like business meetings. For medieval nobles, sex wasn't about passion, it was about producing heirs. And for that, timing was everything. Couples consulted priests, physicians, and even astrologers to pinpoint the perfect moment to conceive. The rules? Midnight was best. The weather needed to be humid. The couple had to face east, ideally during a waxing moon. Want a boy? Tie off your left testicle because boys supposedly came from the right one. Want a girl? Reverse it. On top of this, the church banned sex on Sundays, Fridays, during Lent, during Advent, during pregnancy, during breastfeeding, and on over 180 other days of the year. That left surprisingly little time for spontaneity. Basically, nobles lived by the world's first fertility app, except instead of algorithms. It ran on astrology, superstition, and wishful thinking. And if the stars didn't cooperate, they turned to something stranger, magical underwear. Yes, medieval people actually had sex charms sewn into their underwear. Fertility belts known as the Girdle of Venus were engraved with prayers and religious symbols, believed to boost passion and guarantee childbirth. Women carried amulets filled with powdered unicorn horn, really narwhal tusk, or even wore conception stones during sex. Emeralds were thought to produce boys, sapphires produced girls, and diamonds supposedly gave you twins. Men, meanwhile, strapped on blessed loincloths or carried charms made from animal testicles. And of course, the church offered blessings for these items for a price. In other words, medieval couples literally paid for a holy subscription service to boost their bedroom performance. But even with amulets and magical belts, not everything worked out. And when things didn't, medieval society had a humiliating way of dealing with in a world where divorce was nearly impossible. There was only one escape clause: prove your husband was impotent. And that meant putting your entire sex life on trial. The process began with doctors examining both partners. If results were inconclusive, the couple was ordered to attempt intercourse under official supervision. Judges, priests, and medical experts sometimes watched through peepholes, or, in some cases, stood right in the room to observe. If the husband failed, the trial might be repeated multiple times over weeks or months. Men even tried smuggling in aphrodisiac herbs to boost performance, but guards conducted strip searches to prevent cheating. The shame was often so unbearable that many men preferred annulment over going through the ordeal. Imagine standing before your community, accused of failing in bed, and then being forced to prove yourself on command. That was medieval justice. And yet, the biggest twist was still to come. Because while the church condemned lust, it secretly ran one of the largest brothel networks in Europe. Yes, you heard that right. The medieval church didn't just preach chastity, it profited from prostitution. In London's Southwark district during the 12th century, there were at least 18 licensed brothels, all owned and operated by none other than the Bishop of Winchester. Prostitutes paid rent to brothel keepers, who in turn paid taxes directly to the church. The money funded cathedrals, monasteries, and religious festivals. Officially, the church condemned sin, but unofficially, it used sex work as a steady income stream. This hypocrisy was so blatant that people began calling the women who worked there Winchester geese. They were buried in unmarked graves when they died, often from disease, while their earnings went to build churches towering above the city skyline. So, the same priests who scolded peasants for lust were cashing checks from the world's oldest profession. But if you think that's shocking, wait until you hear the insane things medieval people tried to avoid pregnancy. When it came to birth control, the Middle Ages were a nightmare. Some methods were useless, others downright dangerous, and most sound like cruel pranks. Women wore necklaces made of weasel testicles, believing they warded off pregnancy. Others drank concoctions made with mercury, lead, or powdered beaver genitals. One method recommended pepper or sneezing powders immediately after sex to expel the seed. Barrier methods were even stranger. Some women inserted honey-soaked wool, half a lemon, or even crocodile dung as makeshift contraceptives. Others relied on spells, whispered charms, or amulets. The withdrawal method was known, but medieval doctors warned it could cause blindness, madness, or even death. Instead of offering safe solutions, most advice mixed superstition with torture. Looking back, these weren't really methods of contraception. They were survival risks dressed up as medical advice. Which proves one thing, in the Middle Ages, avoiding pregnancy might have been more dangerous than getting pregnant. So, what have we learned? That the Middle Ages were anything but prudish. They bundled teenagers into sacks, feasted on aphrodisiacs, consummated marriages with witnesses, and scheduled sex by the stars. They blessed magical underwear, staged public impotence trials, ran brothels from church property, and tried birth control methods that ranged from laughable to lethal. Medieval sexuality wasn't pure. It was chaotic, bizarre, and deeply human. If history teaches us anything, it's that people have always been weird, kinky, and inventive. The Dark Ages weren't dark because people weren't having sex. They were dark because of how they were having it. So, tell me in the comments which practice shocked you the most.